And we'll start this evening with an introduction of the commissioners.
I'm Jim Preschlack.
Bill Ransom.
Kurt Pairitz.
Guy Berg.
Virginia McTier. Mary Ellen Swenson.
And the staff.
Megan O'Neill. Kathy Cerniak.
All right. And first order of business tonight, we've got meeting minutes for both the October 27th meeting and the November 23rd meeting for last year. I believe those have been circulated to everybody. I think that there were some corrections that were turned in. Unless there's any other comments on that, I would look for a motion to approve those.
So moved.
Moved by Commissioner
Second.
McTier, seconded by Commissioner Berg. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Thank you.
Is that both minutes?
That's for both. I did
Okay.
both, if
Not
that's
bad.
okay.
That's right. Didn't change my vote.
Yes, thank you. All right, we're going to dive right in. We have our first order of business tonight is a continued petition. It's a request for a certificate of appropriateness to allow the demolition of the existing residence and construction of a replacement residence located at 475 East Westminster. And I think Mark Downey is the representative. If you want to give us a presentation. Do we want any background on this, Kathy?
I think it's appropriate to start with
Okay.
the petitioner's presentation.
Thank you.
Good evening. We are excited to be here tonight to present our revised plans and details. I will address each comment made by the Commission at our last meeting using our SketchUp model. In addition, per the Commission's request, we will present a series of studies showing the proposed construction detailing at prominent architectural elements. At the conclusion of my portion, Drew Johnson of Rocco Fiore and Sons will present the landscape portion of our proposal. The Commission first asked us to study the width of the structure and can it be reduced. Our current proposal is 6 inches narrower than the original. In addition, we have lowered the bearing height or the wall heights of the eastern and western most elements. They step back from the front facade, and in our opinion, they also reduce the impression of the overall width of the house. The width of the house as viewed from the street is softened by both the existing and proposed plantings, and this will be illustrated in the landscape portion of our presentation. The Commission then asked us to study the location of the new house relative to the neighbors. The location of the house has not changed from the original submission. We feel that the proposed location, with the removal of the existing and detached garage and the sunroom of the existing home, relates better to the neighbor to the west by opening up both their front and rear yard views. The Commission also asked us if the proposed home could be stepped up to relate the footprint of our home more in line with the neighbor to the east. The footprint of the proposed home has changed slightly, primarily the east and west wings. We have not stepped the footprint up as we feel would be a detriment to our eastern neighbors and block the views that they currently enjoy. The Commission asked that we review the drainage issues of the site, specifically for the neighbor to the east, the proposed driveway, and whether a retaining wall would be required at the west property line. We have prepared and submitted our proposed engineering for the site to the engineering department for their preliminary review, which is noted, I believe, in the staff report. The proposed finished grade elevation of the proposed house is approximately 1.89 feet lower than the existing, reducing the overall height of the proposed residence even further than originally submitted. A retaining wall is not required at the west property line as a natural drainage swale is proposed. The proposed driveway is 5 feet away from the property line at the east side, and the proposed drainage ties into the existing drainage patterns. Also, please note that the curb cut for the proposed driveway is shifted only approximately 6 feet to the west from the location it currently exists. The Commission also asked us to study the design details at the south side or back of our proposed garage. The window fenestration at the south elevation has been modified and dormers have been added. In addition, an offset in the south wall has been incorporated by reducing the size of the accessory functions in the garage, which creates an offset in the roof plane. The top of foundation at the south wall has been raised to allow the existing drainage patterns to remain. This results in a lower overall impression of the garage height as viewed from the south and a better balanced composition as viewed from the west. The Commission asks that we provide details of architectural elements for the proposed structure. These series of details show photos of existing historic home design elements, our interpretation of those elements in elevation, and the proposed construction detailing. We start here with the portico element on the front entrance of the north side. Then we move to the entrance door surround at that portico. This is the details of the dormers that occur on the front elevation or the north elevation. You can see there are two types. There are the more formal ones that are in the main body of the house, which are here. And then there's less detailed elements as the house moves to the east and the west. These are the dormers at the rear elevation. Both there's a pair of the larger ones and a single in the middle. This is an example of design detailing for the windows in general, but in particular the window head, the sill, the shutters, and the holdbacks, and also there will be the hinges on those as they will be detailed historically. This is the detailing of the bow windows, which there are two of them that occur on the back side, the south elevation. And then a series of eave, rake, overhang details that occur in various locations throughout the house. Some of them on the main portion of the house have the dental elements, and the elements, again, that proceed both to the east and the west don't have the dentals. In summary, this home has been designed for and is appropriate for this site. It is true to its chosen style and use of materials, to which there is precedent in the neighborhood. We have been respectful to the neighboring homes in siting of the home and integration into the existing topography. In closing, we believe that this home will be an asset to the fabric and character of the historic district. I'll now turn it over to Drew Johnson for the landscape portion.
Good evening. I'd like to take the opportunity to say thank you for giving me the opportunity to present this evening. As a team, we've worked our way through this project. We've looked at the different challenges and the different things around the site. We've really taken into consideration the softening of the views from the streetscape. We've taken into consideration to maintain the integrity of the street view, minor changes, enhancements. We've looked at replacing some of the struggling plants with newer plants. So we've really tried to just bring this site back to life with the landscape. We've worked to maintain the screening that is on the site and to increase the screening in areas to provide that privacy for neighbors as well as Tim and Sally when they move into this house. Our palette on the property is a soft kind of natural feel with a gravel driveway, soft clay paver of some variety. Basically, we're looking at some stone walls to deal with the grade changes. We're looking at soft gray tones, brown tones for the palette of the material, possibly field stone walls similar to like a New York field stone. As we work our way through the property, we're giving it a very relaxed feel, almost like a cottage feel. Not real showy gardens, but just great little detail gardens. We move into the terraces and the walkways, and they're flagstone or bluestone, but a regular large piece is something very comfortable for the site. You notice around the pool that we have somewhat of an irregular edge. We're trying to create this just kind of nice, real comfortable feel with the site. We've looked at the side where the driveway comes down. The driveway has been shifted over on the site from the last presentation with architecture. Through there, we've added an arborvitae hedge. Along with that arborvitae hedge, we've worked with the engineers to have a series of inlets along the driveway that'll handle that water that's coming down the driveway, because I know that's one of the concerns on this site. So we've actually set it up so our arborvitae are creating kind of that buffer line where we're going to channel the water, keep it on the edge of the driveway, and collect it in the drains as we bring it down the drive to avoid that water entering the neighbor's property. Also throughout the property, we've terraced it. We have some gentle lawn steps going from the lower lawn area just outside the back porch to the upper lawn. And within that area there, we've managed to regrade the property slightly. We're doing a balance, a little bit of a cut and fill, and we've been able to incorporate small drain inlets. So we've basically taken this and we're ensuring that we're going to be able to collect more water than what's being collected right now on the site. The fencing around the site will be coming around and closing in basically halfway up the sides of the house, so that's where we'll be having the enclosure so we can maintain an open field through the back. So in summary, we're trying to create just a nice, comfortable setting for this house. We're trying to be sure that we include and think about the privacy both for the neighbors and for the Downeys. And we look forward to this project moving ahead. So, thank you.
Thank you. This was a postponed or continued petition, but we have one commissioner here that wasn't here last time, so I need to make sure you don't have an ex parte conflict. Thank you. You can add that to your record. And then, do we have a staff follow-up? Thanks.
Thank you, Chairman Pairitz, members of the commission. I'm going to make a few comments to start off with and then turn it over to Megan. Just a bit of background. This item was before you in November. We brought it forward really as an expedited petition. This was a situation where the current owners are losing the house. The banks were getting involved, and there was an opportunity for a new owner to step in on a very short timeline. So recognizing that situation, we did encourage the petitioner to put together a packet very quickly, which they did. We presented it to you in November for preliminary direction so that the contract purchaser would know whether to, in fact, continue to invest some time and money, whether it seemed that the solution that was being proposed may be something the commission wanted to continue to consider. And following that direction, the petitioner went away, did further work. You had also directed staff to do further work, particularly with respect to research on the demolition. So tonight this is before you as a full packet with a staff recommendation for both approval of the demolition and approval of the replacement structure subject to conditions of approval. With respect to the demolition, at your November meeting, you heard testimony both in support of the demolition and in opposition to the demolition. Those kinds of discussions are very important to have within the historic district. That's the reason the commission exists. Any decision on demolition within the historic district traditionally has been done in a very deliberative manner. So it was appropriate to step back from this request and do that research. In conducting the research, staff did learn that at the time the original East Side Historic District was created in 1978, this particular property was not specifically called out in that nomination as a contributing structure. The property clearly is part of the district, but it was not called out as a contributing structure. In the mid-'80s, the city approved a significant alteration to the house, conversion of the existing garage to living space, and the addition of a garage located in front of the main house. Based on our records, we can't find that any significant deliberation occurred, that there were any issues identified with respect to compromising the integrity of the house. The city did approve the alteration and addition and did issue a permit. That construction occurred, and that is obvious on the site today. In the late 90s, 98 or 99, when the city adopted its own preservation ordinance, and when this same district was adopted as a local district, the city then used some interns and some staff, people on staff at that time, and did another cursory review of all of the properties within the East Side Historic District. At that time, the criteria that was used with respect to identifying contributing structures was really to err on the side of identifying more structures as contributing as opposed to fewer. So in particular, structures that were over 50 years old and structures that were associated with architects of importance and architects of particular importance to Lake Forest, those homes were designated as contributing. In that identification, there were some aspects of the house that were called out, the brackets, the eaves in particular. But there was no particular overall discussion on unique significance of this structure. The commission more recently approved alterations for the current owners of the property. I believe they're the current owners. Those alterations were approved. Permits were issued and some of the work was undertaken. That family then faced a serious medical issue, and that really brings us to where we are today. As we look at the facts of this particular property in relation to the demolition criteria, staff is comfortable coming to the conclusion that approval of demolition of this property would not be contrary to the preservation ordinance and would not diminish the integrity of the overall historic district. As the commission over the years, since it was formed in the late 90s, has discussed demolition, I think a key philosophy of the commission has always been to recognize the importance of being selective of what's preserved. Preservation simply for the sake of preservation can actually serve to diminish the integrity of the ordinance, can result in some loss of credibility. In particular, in talking with a preservation consultant on this particular property, the key piece that seems to have occurred to really call into question the integrity of this piece was the city's approval in the mid-'80s of what was considered to be a significant alteration and diminishment of the integrity of this property. So the fact that the city was involved in those approvals, supported at that time action that diminished the integrity of the property, and coupled with the fact that originally this was not called out specifically in the original district, those two facts seem to be very strong in supporting a demolition at this point in time of the structure. Of course, one of your criteria is that the replacement structure be appropriate and that be compatible, and that also not harm the integrity of the district. And Megan is going to make some comments on the replacement structure.
Thank you, Mr. Niak. Chairman Pairitz, members of the commission. Just some brief comments on the replacement structure. Back in November, the commission did provide some good input to the petitioner. They provided tonight a pretty detailed explanation of the modifications that they made and how they took your comments and responded to them. The primary comments that were made were relating to the details of the proposed structure to provide the commission with more detail to allow the commission to really understand what the replacement structure is going to look like, what the character of that house really is, to look at the width of the house, to look at the grading, and to look at the garage. With respect to the details, while the elevations that you have in your packet may not look too different from what was provided in November, the petitioner did provide close-up details of the window surrounds, of the column detailing, eave returns, and all of those details do appear to be compatible with the architecture of the structure proposed. With respect to the width, looking at the house with the landscaping, I think really does soften the width of the house, and the garage modifications that they've made have improved the relationship of this structure to other properties in the area. I will say that since the staff report was written, the city's arborist did have a chance to go out and visit the site. There are trees on the neighboring properties that are large, and I think the petitioner is aware of a large elm to the west and some spruce trees in the southeast corner on neighboring property. And maybe as a condition of approval, we would recommend asking that a report of some sort be presented to staff to look at the integrity of those trees and make sure that an agreement is made with neighboring property owners to allow the construction to go forward. I'm not sure of the actual health of those trees. I think that's what we need to really identify, is if those trees are healthy and if there's a possibility of removing them from the neighboring property owners. Finally, a grading plan was submitted to our engineers for a preliminary review. Currently, stormwater runoff is not controlled on the property, and the current proposal is putting in a system that will direct the water from the property into the city system. And as the preliminary review by our engineers, it does appear that our ordinances could be met with this plan. There are findings in support of the replacement structure and the demolition in the staff report, and we'd be happy to answer any questions that you have.
Okay, and Megan, I just want to make sure I understand what you were saying about the trees. Are you saying that in your recommendation you do include that comment of the of reviewing the trees between the properties?
As one of the recommended conditions of approval would be to have a report reviewing the trees on the neighboring properties.
And I'm looking at
to give us more information.
Yeah, I'm looking at that, and I'm trying to find it. You just point out which number that is in your recommendation.
This is what I'm suggesting it now.
Okay, fine.
Yes.
That was my question.
After the staff report was written, our arborist was able to visit the site and give us a little bit more insight on that.
All right. Other questions from the commission for the petitioner, if we have any? Please, Jim.
Yeah, I have a question, Kathy. Can you tell us just roughly in 1978 how many structures in the district were labeled contributing structure? I'm just trying to get a feel for how comprehensive that process was, and then in terms of number, and then also if you got a general sense for how many in the 90s, just to, if it was 1 or 2 in 78 and 500 in 90, I think that would be different than 300 and then 20 more. I'm just trying to get a sense of proportion and understanding of that process.
I don't know the exact number, but Megan and I both looked at each other and said 50 was the initial.
Okay.
So yes, it very much, in the 90s, the philosophy was, let's really call out anything that could possibly be considered significant, thinking that does at least raise the bar of review. Interesting that at the time, in the 70s, when the original district was created, this house was already 50 years old, and even with that, it was not specifically called out.
Mm-hmm. So 50 and 78, and then I guess in 90s when it said let's tag everything, it was 100 or 200, or was it another 50, or?
It was more than another 50.
Covered a great deal of the
Yeah.
district.
Went more, like you said, from 50 to 300 because the philosophy changed. And I think the concern in the 90s was that we were in the midst of the teardown phenomenon. And very quickly, homes were being bought for speculation and by people who really had no interest in the future of the community and no interest in being part of the community. So I think in the 90s, we very much went the other direction, which wasn't wrong. I think what it was intended to do was really raise the bar, raise the level of review, and it came at the time when we had just established the Preservation Commission. Mm-hmm. So all of those pieces were coming together. Interestingly, the community, in about that same time frame, between the 70s and the 90s, had talked multiple times about adopting a preservation ordinance and establishing a preservation commission. In the 70s, there wasn't support for whatever reason. It wasn't a critical issue. It was talked about a number of times. There were a number of ad hoc committees appointed, and it wasn't until '98 when I think all of these things came together and everyone was seeing some very rapid change, that at that time the preservation ordinance was adopted and the commission was put in place with very little discussion at all. So I think you had several things coming together creating that.
And do you think all the Stanley Anderson homes in the district were tagged in '98?
My guess is yes, that they are all now. They weren't originally all identified as contributing. Today they are, and whether some of them should have been looked at more closely or not, but just about all of them are, would be my guess.
Thanks.
I'm still having a problem with the demolition piece of this petition. I appreciate the questions Jim asked. Since the 98, 99 time frame, has the city looked at contributing structures or how they designate contributing structures and done a review of those?
We are in the process of doing that now. We were able to get a grant. We are working with a preservation consultant. We have some volunteers. So we are going through that process, and I think this discussion has helped us go back and really try and ask the question about what should we really be looking at. Designation of a local landmark or designation of a district is very different than the discussion and categorization as contributing structures. The designation requires commission action and city council action and is actually part of the ordinance. The contributing category really is almost more academic. It really helps us to sort through properties, certainly call out properties that require additional study. It helps us as staff and counseling people. It kind of gives us that first cut and says, here's something you need to look at a little bit more closely.
But what I'm trying to get an answer to, has that been done since '98? I understand the city's in the process of looking at that again, but has it been done any time since '98?
No,
Okay.
This is the first time it's being relooked at since '98.
And when the city did that in '98, it was at the direction of the city council to do that? I mean, how did that come about?
That came about as actually we brought in some interns. It was a project that was started before the commission was actually established, and it came about because we said we have this historic district, we haven't looked at it in a while, some homes have been altered, some new homes have been constructed, and it's time to look at it. So it was a staff-initiated effort to, at that point, look at each house. Update our photographs is always part of that process too.
And did the city council have to approve those as contributing structures, or were they just designated by the staff as being a contributing structure and
the categorization as contributing or non-contributing that's done periodically is not something that requires action or approval by the commission or by the city council. The designation itself, now if we were to go through a process today and find that we have properties that perhaps should be taken out of the district or properties that should be added, we may want to step back and bring the whole district back, because the study that we did as part of the contributing, non-contributing provided us with information that told us we should make these more formal changes.
Okay, just so I understand the process, and I don't mean to be tedious about this. In '98, the staff looked at this and decided it was a contributing structure. Now it's before us, and since the staff designated a contributing structure, it's up to us to decide whether it should be demolished or not, because it was designated contributing structure. Is that correct?
Any structure within the historic district, whether it's contributing or non-contributing, requires commission action for demolition.
Okay.
What the categorization does is really helps direct our research. And helps the commission really identify if there's a red flag, something that should be looked at further. But whether something is contributing or non-contributing, it still requires commission action for demolition.
And the only two criteria that were looked at was the age and the fact that it was Stanley Anderson home.
In the late 90s, those were two first level threshold criteria that were used. I can't say those were the only criteria.
Okay, you said there was also some significant brackets and
the bracketing on the house was noted, the deep eaves on the house was noted as well.
And does that still exist today?
It does.
Okay. Now the changes that the city staff has designated significant to changing the character and the integrity, that's adding the detached garage to the property, is that correct?
Yes, that was the most significant change, changing the
And that
existing...
wasn't original to the Stanley Anderson home, correct?
Correct. Those
Okay.
changes occurred in the mid-'80s.
And those changes to the garage were making a living space? Is that what we're talking about?
Yes, in the mid-'80s, the existing garage was converted to living space.
And they added.
And the garage was added in front of the western portion of the house.
And when they changed the existing garage to living space, how is the exterior of it altered, if you know, if the petitioner knows or you know?
The garage doors were replaced with windows. And if you look at the detailing that was done at that time, it wasn't necessarily done in a way that was consistent with the overall character of the house. It could have been done in a different manner. And perhaps the garage could have been located differently, or but that would have been a significant change even if they had located the garage in a different place. So that was a significant change in the mid-'80s.
Oh.
So Kathy, is it safe to say in the 90s it was kind of a catch-all designation to, I don't know, I guess to be ultra-conservative around kind of tear-downs? You had mentioned that. I think what Bill's getting to is the level of scrutiny around, the 90s process. If it was just, if it was some interns and they checked the home because it was Stanley Anderson.
I don't think it's fair to say that it was a catch-all. I think very much there was heightened concern because of what was happening in the community.
Mm-hmm.
There was a lot of pressure, and some very significant homes were lost. And I think as we started seeing more of that, there was an interest in going back and looking at the homes that were left. It was clear that they were that the threshold used to identify contributing structures was broader in the 90s than it was in the 70s. And then at about the same time, the commission was established. So I think you did have heightened concern, heightened awareness, and a fear that change was happening too fast. So by putting more layers of review in place, specific criteria, it simply slowed down the process and allowed the time to ask the question and to be very selective about preservation. Again, I think we've seen that the community hasn't supported preservation simply for the fact of preserving, but to be selective and then be fierce about what is preserved and what is important to preserve.
Just one other question that while I'm thinking about it. Last time we were here, the style of the existing home was described as Maryland Tidewater, I think we said. Have we determined that that's the only Stanley Anderson example of that in the city, is of a Maryland Tidewater home?
We have not made that determination.
Okay, so we don't know
I
if
can't
this
speak
is
to that.
more unique than other Stanley Anderson homes. Would that be fair to say?
I think it's fair to say there are other Stanley Anderson homes that maybe have more distinctive features.
Okay.
This certainly was in its original creation a Stanley Anderson home, and had its own unique features. Those have been modified over time.
Okay. And the unique feature, well, since we're using the word unique, obviously they wouldn't be anyplace else, but the features on this home wouldn't be found in other Stanley Anderson homes around the community. Yeah, is that fair to say, or? The Stanley Anderson elements that continue to exist.
I can't say that in particular, the deep eaves and the brackets that are found in this house are not used in some other, we didn't do that, level of study.
I think last meeting when I asked Paul that question, Bergman, he had said the brackets were pretty unique above the front door.
Yeah, that was my recollection.
But I mean, every home is unique in that it's a home.
Every home's unique, that's
I mean,
true.
That's just.
How about other questions from the commissioner for either the staff or the petitioner?
Yeah, I have a question regarding the landscape plan, just so I understand. Now, has this landscape plan been reviewed by the arborist yet? This is a question for staff. The plan that we have tonight. Are they in the process of?
There's been a preliminary review, but it has not been approved in its final state.
Okay.
It's expected there would be some further refinement and discussions with the petitioner's landscaper.
Okay, great.
Could we see the SketchUp of the front of this house again? Thanks, this is helpful. I always like to see the third dimension in these things. I have a question about the proportions of the front door entry, and I wanted to make sure that the other questions regarding the demolition were talked about first if we could. This is on the level of minutia as opposed to big scale questions. So as I look at this front elevation, just, you know, the entrance portico, if you will, and I compare it to, as a matter of fact, you've done this in your submittal when you've compared it to these other ones. It has a much more vertical feel to it, despite the fact that this is a pretty, it's balanced, but it's horizontal solution. And even in the, you probably don't have these slides, but if you were to look at the comparison to the other two examples that have a wider spacing of columns and kind of a more horizontal feel, and I just was wondering if that was intentional, if this was, you know, not a fully developed study of that, or if you intentionally decided that that needed to be a little more vertical in this solution, or what your comments would be on that.
Well, it's completely intentional. The home that our client is familiar with and inspired this one, this entire composition is used, you know, based on part of that model. And we've looked very carefully at the proportions of that house on Moffett and tried to scale them down proportionally for that. Now, you can possibly rotate it down. This is above eye level, so it tends to, you know, distort things a little bit more.
Okay. Any other questions?
I had a question of staff, and I was just wondering why for such a long time the building materials have been allowed to stay in front, you know, in front of the house. You have the bricks and so forth, and they've been there in such an eyesore. Why has that been allowed?
Our code enforcement officer has been involved with the property. The family has had serious medical issues.
I know.
We do have a distressed property ordinance. We did not take the step of heavy enforcement with this property in an effort to try and work with the owners. And so yes, it has been under construction for a long time.
Thank you.
And Kathy, I mean, can you give us a sense for how long it has been since no one's been there? And because I know the last meeting, a lot of the neighbors were concerned about that, and I think that is part of our role in terms of balancing various stakeholders here.
I think the commission approved it in 2008, and I would have to think construction took place shortly after that, so more than a year. But that that in and of itself is not a criteria for demolition.
No, I realize that. It's just an eyesore.
Yeah, I mean, I think in 10 years maybe it would be, right? I mean, I think there's a time period in which there needs to be a solution for the neighborhood, and I think Kurt had talked about that at the last meeting, and I think that's relevant to this case.
If it's strictly an enforcement issue, we do deal with that in a different way. So
Yeah, okay.
I think it's important to separate those two. We do have a couple other homes that we're dealing with currently, and some of those we have brought before the city's administrative hearings officer, and that is a very different process in getting the violations on the site corrected. That's very different than the commission's role in evaluating a petition consistent with the preservation ordinance.
I have a question.
Please, go ahead.
The home
Thanks.
has been exposed to the elements for quite a while. At what point after the city sees that the home is exposed, does it step in and then say, you know, someone needs to wrap this house and sort of protect it from itself?
We do identify properties as distressed properties. Once we notice properties as that, there is a pretty tight time frame for either seeing response and the house being secured or taking further enforcement action. So once we do become aware of situations, we do move forward with the enforcement process. In this case, because of the serious medical issues of the family, we were trying to work with them, and we did not move into an enforcement mode. And then this opportunity, the property became available for sale.
So how long has this house been open and exposed after the interior demolition was done?
My sense is that it's been open for quite a while.
Over a year?
I don't know for sure, but it has been exposed for a while.
Okay, if there's not any other questions, this is the opportunity for public testimony, if there's any on this subject.
Good evening, I'm Paul Bergman, and I'm the keeper of the Stanley Anderson Architectural Archives. I came and spoke last time and put on a presentation. If this house were to come before you in a year's time, when the review of the review that Kathy Cerniak talked about of reviewing the 1978 Historic Register application is completed, I think you would be facing a much different situation. I think the house would be deemed a contributing house at that time. To address some of the questions that you raised, this is the only Maryland Tidewater house that Stanley Anderson built in Lake Forest. So the house is unique in that regards. The Stanley Anderson firm built over 200 houses in the Lake Forest, Lake Bluff, and Lake County area. And it is only in the mid-1990s, after my father passed away, that we began documenting all of the houses. There are a number of Stanley Anderson houses that essentially disappeared. They were lost in, I wasn't aware of them, my father wasn't aware of them, but they exist in the documentation. Whether the owners made an issue of that when surveys were being made or when the realtors were buying and selling the houses was always sort of a hit or miss affair. There's any number of houses in Lake Forest that have been identified as Stanley Anderson houses that are not Stanley Anderson. And I've had to go through and try and identify those houses and ask the realtors to stop listing them as Stanley Anderson houses. This is the existing house is a vernacular style house. The Stanley Anderson house that is built in the Maryland Tidewater style is a unique house. There's comments that the window spacing on the house is irregular. Many of the houses that you find that are vernacular home-built houses in the Maryland Tidewater area are vernacular. They have windows that are placed wherever the builders built them. I think you're making a very poor decision this evening. sorry to criticize you in this fashion, but I think you're making a rush to judgment. This board has one of the most powerful tools in the country. Of all of the historic preservation commissions, you have a 2-year hold on demolitions. If you find a house contributing and want to put a hold on it, you can hold that house for a full 2 years. That is almost the exact same time limit that the developers are talking about if this house goes into foreclosure. You have one of your predecessor boards has a great story to tell for the house at 1414 Green Bay Road, where your predecessor commission put a 2-year demolition hold on a Howard Van Doren Shaw house, and at the 23rd month, a couple from the East Coast arrived and said, we love old houses, we like Howard Van Doren Shaw, and they stepped in, remodeled the house, put a huge addition on it, and that house still exists today. And the community, the Green Bay Road community, benefits from that today. So you're being asked to move quickly because of this foreclosure issue. I don't think it's in your best interest to be moving quickly. Your board is set up in such a fashion with this 2-year hold that you don't have to move quickly. The house is designed by a well-known and prominent architect. Stanley Anderson made enormous contributions to this town. He's one of the finest architects that has worked in this town. He's educated at the École des Beaux-Arts, as are many of the other great architects. His work stretches from the high school, the hospital, the bank, many of the downtown buildings. We think there are some 200 homes in Lake Forest and the surrounding areas that are done. I can't give you an exact count on that because some of the homes are such huge remodel jobs that the original house essentially turns into a Stanley Anderson house. But this is a house built by a very prominent architect. It was built for a prominent local businessman. Carl Kraft was a druggist in town, built many projects in town, built an extension onto Market Square, so he is a prominent business person in the town. The house itself is unique. It has this wonderful rolling gable on the back side of the house. Unfortunately, the fireworks, the really wonderful design elements of the house are on the back side, facing into the sunlight, facing into the backyard. The house has been criticized for having Tuscan columns on it, but the Tuscan columns end up being an homage back to Stanley Anderson's mentor, Howard Van Doren Shaw. He's only 2 or 3 years out of Shaw's office, and so it's quite natural that in a column situation, he would use columns that his mentor used. The columns are reminiscent of the front door columns at Ragdale, as well as other residences in town. We talked about the corbels and the brackets on the house. Those are unique to the house and also unique to the Stanley Anderson work. So I think you're making a decision that is going to come back to you in the future in ways that is going to be very problematic for you. So I would once again ask that you not demolish the house. Thank you.
Thank you. Other public testimony? Seeing none, any other comments or questions from the commissioners?
Yeah, Kathy, I wanted you to elaborate on a comment that you had mentioned around, because I think this is key to this issue, is that our charter is not to preserve at all costs, and that there's selective, preservation, and that sometimes if you preserve across the board and just say there's just no Stanley Anderson homes in this town, they're going to be torn down, that could come back and hurt our cause for preservation in terms of being selective. And I would like to hear your thoughts on that, and also guys and others on the commission that are a bit more attuned to the architectural heritage of this town, because I think that's really the issue. At least for me right now, I kind of hear the staff saying the garage conversion and the removal of the doors, and I think there was some material that was off the house, and the addition of the new garage was really horrible. And if we wanted to preserve the structure like Stanley Anderson built it, those things never should have happened in the first place. And now they seem to be the reason why we think we can tear it down. So if you could answer that question for me, I think that would be helpful.
Staff did look at this carefully with an eye toward how would either decision, a decision to deny the demolition or a decision to approve the demolition, what impact does that have on the integrity of the historic district and on the integrity of the ordinance itself? I think every decision the board makes has to be looked at in that context. And as we looked at this specific property and the facts related to this specific property, and as we looked at the criteria in the ordinance for demolition, we did conclude, and speaking to the criteria, that this particular house is not of such historic, cultural, architectural significance that the demolition would be detrimental to the public interest or contrary to the ordinance or harm the integrity of the neighborhood or of the historic district. We did acknowledge that over time the integrity of this particular structure has been compromised, setting aside the current condition. It was compromised in the 80s not through neglect of the owners, but through the city was really an accomplice in approving, and because the awareness wasn't heightened, not at that time, really raising the questions that you're raising tonight. That work was done. It was done many years ago, and the city was a part in approving this. There is no question this house was built by someone who is important to Lake Forest and who is a renowned architect. The house, even today, to use the words of the chairman, has brilliant moments.
That was my words.
It was, and I gave you
I'm
credit.
supposed to get those, not you.
You can say them again. They were just so brilliant, I had to use them.
Thank you for the credit.
But the house has been compromised, and from the staff's perspective, as we have watched these discussions occur, the commission has to look carefully at the criteria, but also acknowledge that there are some practicalities and some realities that if we hold a strong line and preserve everything, it could create the very opposite reaction that the commission wants in the community. You heard from every neighbor in the area that they would support a change on this property, that they did not see this particular house as a house that is one that people go by and say, this is why I live in Lake Forest. This is, you drive by this house and you just get that feeling that it's something really special.
Not in its current state.
Well, setting aside its current state,
that's for us to decide.
Setting aside its current state, which doesn't really go to the criteria, the compromises that took place in the 80s really are the key for our recommendation. I did, if I could, just want to clarify that the commission doesn't have the ability to put a 2-year hold on demolition. The Building Review Board, because the Building Review Board cannot deny a demolition, they are the body that has the ability to defer a demolition for 2 years. The commission is required to make a decision to either approve the petition or deny the petition. So I just wanted to clarify that.
I just have a comment because just my sense is I'm the one on the board who is most opposed to the demolition here. I have to start from a point where I look at the historic preservation ordinance and the criteria that the city council has asked us to apply to these demolitions. I don't think that in opposing demolition, this necessarily says that either this board or myself is going to preserve everything, or that we're going to never approve a demolition of a Stanley Anderson home. The problem I have is that the ordinance says that if this is unique, so old or unique, that we shouldn't approve demolition. And all I hear in the uncontradicted materials before me is that this is a unique home, and it has a character that other Stanley Anderson homes in this community don't have. Now, I understand that it's been vacant for a time, that it may be deteriorating, that there is an opportunity here to have a very concerned and well-regarded homeowner do something with this property that would be both, you know, to their benefit and maybe to the character of the neighborhood. But unfortunately, I see it that the ordinance doesn't allow me to approve demolition under those criteria, even though I may think those are important factors. So I understand the other board members may feel differently, but just applying the ordinance as I see it, as I read it, I can't approve demolition.
So maybe I'd like to take back my brilliant moments. The house does have brilliant moments. There's no doubt about it, and you want to carry the curly Q soffit overhang home and put it in your family room. It's so nice. You know what I'm saying? The shutters are nice. It's not even part of the house, but you know, whatever you call those things that you walk through that are falling all over the backyard, you know, are just, you know, they're brilliant moments. There's no doubt about it. And I don't think anyone on this board is happy about sitting here tonight and making a value judgment on this house. This is not what we particularly would, you know, if you would have told us when we signed up, this is what we're going to do tonight, probably 6 guys would have said, let's take a pass on that and watch the football game or whatever was on. But here we are, and, you know, we're doing our best. From my point of view, this is not a legal question. This is all of the nomenclature and the wording of the ordinance and whether you characterize something as unique. Those are just ways to broach the central question: is how are we going to help the character of the community that we live in, the character of the neighborhood, the character of the city, whatever, call it whatever you want. But this is about protecting the spirit of what we have here and taking the best of it and making sure we don't lose it, but also allowing it to live and breathe and to change. And, you know, that's why we don't save every single old board we have, because it continues to evolve. So we have a situation here where we have a very nicely executed plan for a piece of property that, if they can build it, I'm sure would be very nice, and I'm sure we could find nitpicks to encourage them with, which we love doing that, because, you know, we get to go home at the end of the day and you have to fix it. And you know, this is a house, from my point of view, that we might be in a different situation if someone was still living here today. The addition had never been done to the front of the house. The addition had never been back to the house, and they had kept it carefully preserved to this day. We might be thinking about this differently. It's not the case. What was allowed to be built, even approved in the last go-round, I'm not particularly fond of. And that's no criticism of the last guy, because we do have a reputation to try to work when we can with owners to allow them to live and utilize the real estate that they own. But, you know, here we are, we're in this position, and the way I see it is it's just a tough call. It's just, you know, it's a kind of cool house. It definitely has brilliant moments. It probably has more brilliant moments than the replacement one in terms of just the individual moments. But in terms of the collective choice, I still come out on top of, you know, that I see this as a benefit to the community. I see it as what we're supposed to be encouraging. And I don't see a way to say, no, we're going to, at all costs, to the rest of the neighbors in the community here, we're going to preserve this because it's old and because it happened to be built by someone who did some other very nice houses that we would probably act different about. And so that's where I come out on it, you know. But I do have some minutia for you if you want.
Well, I'll go next, and I agree with a lot of what Kurt just said, and I think maybe we're paying a lot of attention to definitions and rhetoric and the use of the word unique. And you know, I think this house has gone through enough alterations and has been already reviewed twice by this commission and been taken further away from its original appearance. In fact, I don't know that there are any original drawings for this house. I don't think we've found any of those. And the shed dormer across the front of the roof always looked to me like it was an addition, when there must have been some nice finely detailed dormers similar to this on there to sort of articulate that style a little better. So I think in this particular case, and I think all the deliberations we've done tonight, I think it's actually a wonderful process. We've had 2 sessions now where we've talked about every possible conceivable thing, and I think that's what makes this community so good and this commission so important, is that it just doesn't happen over a counter. And that's part of the deal when you sign up for this board. It's not always going to be easy. I actually feel much more comfortable tonight than last month or the month before in approving, or at least supporting, the demolition and replacement structure. I've gotten quite comfortable with the fact that this house isn't in its original configuration. I wouldn't point it out as a unique example of Stanley Anderson's work to someone visiting town. There are some interesting pieces on the house, as Paul is so wonderfully articulated, and he's a great asset to our commission and town in general for all his knowledge. But I could go on about this, but I'm in support of the demolition, and I think the petitioners have put together a good submittal packet for us and have at least answered a lot of our questions and done some slight adjustments, which I think will help the neighbors, and I think they've done a fine job. I would like the arborist, though, to pay particular attention to the landscaping. I'm a little concerned that what we're doing here is planting a flower garden along Westminster, where I'm not sure if that's how the whole streetscape rolls along. So you might want to maybe keep that in mind when the arborist does look at it. And I know the intent is to soften, and I appreciate that. But in general, I think I like everything that I see.
After receiving everything that Kathy gave us and your architectural firm gave us, there were so many points I had to make that I wrote it down, so forgive me on this. But I'd like to thank the petitioner for all the hard work she has done with her architect to bring before us all the corrections that the HPC commissioners requested at our last HPC meeting in November. This makes the project, to me, a viable one. You have proved to us that you intend to preserve Stanley Anderson's designs and intend to preserve his architectural palette on this site with your new architectural renderings. You have chosen Stanley Anderson's best features from the houses he designed at 361 Moffett Road, with its gracious portico and the equally good portico at 436 Green Bay Road, which actually, to me, I think of that as being on Wesley Road because the Davies own that, and then the Davies gave that house to Pam Hazer, their granddaughter. So that's just beautiful to me. And then the dormers, both interior and exterior at 461 Wesley Road, where the Colemans now live, are well emulated in the replacement home at 475. The door surround elevation is exquisitely drawn. The shutter holdback detail copied from Stanley Anderson's second home for Mr. Kraft at 865 Church Road is very historic. And the house at 475 was for Mr. Kraft, but then after about, 15 years later, he moved across the street to 865, so I might say something. The bow window elevation at 361 Moffett will enhance the proposed Bartholomay Downey home. The shutter detail at the Shanks home at 777 Washington Road and at 361 Moffett Road are much more appropriate than the disproportionate shutter detailed currently at 475 Westminster Road. And I think your proposed landscape plan is beautiful. You've met all the standards of the Lake Forest Historic Preservation Ordinance, Section 55.5, in my opinion, with your plans for a replacement home at 475 Westminster. You've also met all 5 standards in the review of demolitions, and I'd like to read them. 1, whether the property, structure, or object is of such historic, cultural, architectural, or archaeological significance that its demolition would be detrimental to the public interest and contrary to the general welfare of of the people of the city and state. And my reply to that is that the garage and greenhouse additions are inconsistent with Anderson's design principles, and the historic integrity of the structure has been compromised. 2, whether the property, structure, or object contributes to the distinctive historic, cultural, architectural, archaeological character of the district as a whole and should be preserved for the benefit of the people of the city and state. And my reply is the neighborhood contains several more dominant Anderson design homes. Prior to the establishment of the city's historic preservation ordinance, changes were made to this structure and property that significantly changed the character and integrity of the original design. 3, whether demolition of the property, structure, or object would be contrary to the purpose and intent of this chapter and to the objectives of the historic preservation for the applicable district. I reply, the design contribution, condition, uniqueness, and neighborhood support will be greatly improved by the home, which will support the purpose and intent of the standards. The present house does not significantly contribute to the architectural character of the historic district. 4, whether demolition of the property, structure, or object is of such old, unusual, or uncommon design, texture, and or material that it could not be reproduced without great difficulty or at expense. It could be replaced with a superior plan by copying to a certain extent Stanley Anderson's design at 361 Moffett Road in Lake Bluff. 5, except in cases where the owner has no plans for a period of up to 5 years to replace an existing landmark or property, structure, of object in a district, no certificate of appropriateness shall be issued until plans for a replacement structure or object have been reviewed and approved by the commission. And obviously we know Mrs. Downey plans to begin tearing down the house and replacing it as soon as we vote to allow this certificate of appropriateness. The Historic Preservation Commission has reviewed the design of the proposed replacement structure and has determined that the project is consistent with the standards for granting a certificate of appropriateness for a new structure in the historic district. I therefore unequivocally support the demolition of the current home at 475 Westminster and approve building the replacement home designed by Downey, Robbins, Saffris Architects, and the Downeys. Or for the Downeys, excuse me. That's what I have to say. That I had to write down because I couldn't remember every one of those things, but I wanted to prove that this could be demolished and we're not breaking our Historic Preservation Commission principles, in my opinion.
I'm very conflicted. There's not a new construction home within blocks of this proposed new construction. And, you know, any way you look at it, when a new construction home is put on a block and in a neighborhood full of homes that are all pre-war, I think it compromises the feel and the charm and the character of the whole neighborhood. And while this is a lovely design, as I said, I'm conflicted. I just can't give it my full support yet.
So I supported the demolition last meeting, and I still do. I mean, I think it's interesting. I think Guy said it very well, that this is a very good process of deliberation, and we've heard, you know, two sides of the debate. I kind of equate it to, you know, being led with your heart or your head. And, you know, I grew up on East Westminster. I got married across the street, and my parents still live on the same house on the street. I know a lot of the neighbors and the people there, and I kind of grew up walking through those streets. So I can appreciate the heart of the, I guess, of the debate. I'm really rooting for this house. You know, I wish it was never, you know, compromised. I really wish the same family had stayed in it and not done the changes. And I wish the current owner was still in it. And I wish that they didn't get sick. And I wish that they fixed it up and it stayed just the way it was meant to be. But the reality is, when you think of your head, our job's not easy, but we need to make the tough decisions to balance the interests from a cost-benefit perspective on each case. That's going to be different. It's subjective as to what's best for the community. And I think Kurt put that very nicely. And I'm in favor of it because of, I mean, basically the structure is not what it was, and it's changed. And if you go on the site to see it, it's hard to go there and to see all the changes and to think it's contributing. if you listen to Paul Bergman speak, it's hard for you in your heart not to think it's contributing. But the reality is, it's changed, it's been compromised, and it's, I think it's the right thing to do, so I'm in support of it.
It's, I will ask for a motion in 1 minute, but I do want to just add a couple of points. For me, it's not a cost issue at all. It's not a question of economics, and I just want to make sure that that's, you know, we're presented a choice today. We don't get to come up with another choice. I got other ideas, but we just have to make a choice that we get to say yes or no. So it's not about money at all. It's about the choice between the two options that we have to pick from. And with respect to whether or not this was executed in a style, you know, that is reminiscent of the previous architect is totally irrelevant. And for me, I'd just as soon have a really nice Mark Downey design here, which I guess we do, but if you know what I mean, it doesn't, if it were anybody else's design and it was well done, to me, it would be the same choice. Matter of fact, it may even have presented a stronger case for me, because the very fact that you're emulating this design, you're kind of suggesting that it shouldn't be replaced. But for me, it doesn't matter. I understand it's just a design that you like, and so I appreciate that. But it doesn't favor the outcome one way or another, that it's the same style. And then just in terms of the minutia, I do think that the front entrance of this house, and I think it reads differently in the actual drawings than in the SketchUp. You should focus on that when you're doing your real working drawings and think about that proportion a little bit. It just still, to me, feels like that entrance has a little more vertical accentuation, a little more height to it than when after you study it, you might find that you like that a little bit differently. And I think if you look at this difference between even the SketchUp and this rendering, you'll see that the SketchUp shows it a little taller than it really is. So that's a minutia comment for you. The way that the driveway wraps around the east side of the house was a cause for concern the last time we talked about it. And I think that that's another one of those issues where the drawing in 3 dimensions helps us illustrate how that really isn't a problem. I think that in 2 dimensions in a plan, particularly because the rest of the lot is so large, the driveway looked very narrow, looked like it was kind of constrained relative to the rest of the design. It still might be a little bit of a criticism, but I think that it's, you know, definitely workable, and I don't see it as a major issue, given the total solution. So those are my comments. If there's any other discussion, I'd be happy to entertain it. Otherwise, I'll ask for a motion.
Well, I just have a question on the motions, Kathy. You know, according to the ordinance, the demolition ordinance, there has to be approved plans for the replacement structure. So do we take 2 votes, vote on the replacement structure first and then the demolition, or how should we proceed procedurally?
If I understand it correctly, and please, the recommendation is to, in one procedure, approve the demolition and the replacement structure with the conditions that you have suggested, unless someone has other conditions, and with a final 9th condition, which I will let you author, but the spirit of that 9th condition would be to work with the adjacent neighbors to make sure that the trees are assessed and appropriately protected and or replaced on either side. And Megan, if you've got a better wording for that, I'd be happy to hear that. Or if any other commissioner had a better wording for that, I'd be happy to hear that. And if you got a different motion, you can make that one.
Can I just offer, if it would not be improper if the commission, you need to vote on both the demolition and the replacement structure together. You can't take a vote on one. But if you wanted those to be 2 separate motions so that commissioners could weigh in one way on one piece and one way on the other, if you're more comfortable doing it that way, you certainly could.
No, I just don't want to.
Okay.
I think that the one had to precede the other in order to.
In fact, I think we had this conversation at the last meeting, and we did specifically not want to have a motion for demolition without a replacement structure that was ready for approval, so I think we prefer the other direction, Kathy.
Are you ready for a motion?
I would entertain
Can
a
I
motion.
add one other piece? I did hear Commissioner Berg ask that the landscape plan be reviewed, in particular in relation to the streetscape and compatibility with the streetscape. So I don't know what condition number that is that speaks to the landscape, but we will add another point under that to pick up Mr. Berg's.
Make it 3D, if you would, Kathy, that would work.
Got it.
Okay.
Okay, Commissioner McTier, good luck with this motion.
I'd like to recommend that we grant a certificate of appropriateness to allow the demolition of the existing structure and construction of a replacement residence subject to the following recommended conditions of approval. The recommendation is based on the findings presented in this staff report. And that would go 1, 2, 3, A, B, C, D. Now, Mr. Berg has added 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9 regarding Mr. Fiore's landscape plan. And you can word it any way you want.
Thank you. I think the motion's been made by Commissioner McTier. Don't word it any way you want. Word it exactly as it is in the report.
She doesn't own it to perfection, we know that.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Commissioner Berg. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
Opposed.
Motion passes. Thank you. Appreciate it, everyone. Well, that was a difficult one, and we appreciate the insight from the neighbors as well as Mr. Bergman on that. Thank you. Our next order of business is a request for a certificate of appropriateness for a prototype business directory sign for use in the city's business district. This will be presented by the city staff. I'll ask if we have any ex parte conflicts, and are there any?
Chairman
Wait a minute,
Pairitz.
what are we reviewing?
We're reviewing that, so
I gotta go.
there you go. Sorry about that. I knew we had one. Sorry.
Do you want to reverse the order since the
Oh, I'm happy to do that. I'm happy to do that.
sat
We
there
will
for a
do that.
while?
So change that. The next petition will be out of order, petition 5, which is a request for a certificate of appropriateness to allow alterations to an existing attached garage located at 865 Church Road. And I think that Mr. Krasnodebski is going to present this. Oh, because he's not going to know that. What? The thing is, the house really doesn't. It's not very good. It's not very good. I mean, to tell you the truth, I could drive by your house and I have a 5-year-old standing beside it. Yeah. Right, that's the problem. And the problem is that the nomenclature is unique, but the reality is what they're trying to define as quality, and no one can do that as a price. That's what we're here for. No.
And I love Stanley Anderson. I'd jump in front of a bus for Stanley Anderson.
And if you moved into the house and next door, it would be something spectacular, but it wouldn't be the house that Stanley Anderson built.
No, I want to begin with
You changed the whole thing.
Yeah, but the thing is, I did that. You wouldn't have a second floor.
All right, that was a long setup, but we appreciate it.
Thank you for that time. Good evening, Chairman Pairitz and Commissioners. Thanks for listening to our petition tonight. My name is John Krasnodebski, and I'm the architect for this project, and I'm joined here tonight by Walt and Nancy Johnston. They're the homeowners of 865 Church, and we're here today to propose a relatively modest addition to this home. It is a Stanley Anderson contributing structure to the historic district, and the Johnstons have been there for several years, and they'd really like to make an improvement to their home and to add an extra bathroom, essentially, to the home. So it's really updating this classic Stanley Anderson and making it more suitable for today's lifestyles. So,
Do we need a couple more minutes there?
I think because they have their computer plugged in and they have a little technical glitch, so.
Little
yeah, I
reboot.
can do
just-
shadow
May I
puppets.
come
Yeah.
I would turn it off and turn it back on if I were at home.
Yeah, right, right.
I tell my kids, check the auto dial.
Before you do anything else.
So I'm going to show you the streetscape views of the project, and we're being very careful about the size of the added space. We're not asking for any variance to the bulk ordinance. It's all within the square footages that are allowed for this size property. And so we're very careful about the extent of the added space. We're not changing the footprint either of the Stanley Anderson home. We're maintaining the existing footprint and just adding above the existing garage. Thank you. We'll start out with some photos here. These are streetscape photos. These were taken this winter, and it is at the corner of Westminster and Church. And in the upper left-hand corner, you can see the home as you look down westward on Westminster. There is a lot of vegetation, mature vegetation around the home. It's nestled very nicely on the lot, and it's set far back on the lot as well. These are other streetscapes. This is looking west on Westminster. You can see the church. This is the streetscape looking north on Church Road, and I'm standing at the throat of the driveway looking northward. This is a view of 865 Church on the left, and as you can see, it's got great trees surrounding it. Coming in a little closer views of the home. This is standing at the head of the driveway looking at the home. As you can see, it's set very far back on the lot. And here's the garage that we propose to put an addition above the garage. This is a view of the house from Church Road. So to really see the home, you have to stand literally in the driveway. Any other view, it's very well nestled in and screened by the landscape. This is a view from the neighbor to the west, to the north, and you can see the home through some of the trees there. And then this is a closer up view. I'm standing at the back of the garage, or the side of the garage, actually at the back of the garage, looking east. And these are some closer up views still. This is a closer view of the garage, closer still. And you can see there's nice screening along the north side of the home. Here's looking right at the back of the garage, at the corner of the property. So it is really very far back on the lot. And then this is a view standing at the garage looking north. So on the site, I hatched in where our addition is going to occur above the existing garage. We're going to raise the roof by 3.5 feet, and we were very careful about the extent of that height because we wanted to minimize it. We wanted to be really sensitive. We wanted the addition to be overall still subsidiary to the massing of the existing home. So we really kept it to a minimum. You can see this hatch line here is where the existing roof line is, and so the distance from the existing to the new is 3.5 feet. Another important element that we really tried to be very low key on was the connecting link between the bathroom addition and the existing home. Right now there is a shallower roof pitch at above this existing door, and so we've extended that ridge line up so that we can literally walk from the house to the bathroom space. So this is all roofed area. It's shingles to match the roof of the existing home. So it does recede back. You know, it has a pitch to it. Rather than doing a full height wall there in a white material, this will definitely recede and definitely kind of look subsidiary and hopefully disappear as much as possible. Of course, all the materials are going to match the existing construction of the home. Right now, there is a brick base course to the home. The first floor essentially is brick. right now there's a band of wood above the brick that transitions to the shingled gabled end. And so we're going to maintain that detail and just add the shingles, texture, color, size, all match. The eave detail matches the existing garage as well. So we do have a new window in the bathroom area, as well as a dormer on the north side. And you can see it kind of peeks up here. It is constructed as a flat roof dormer, and there is a window well, a copper well. We chose not to put the dormer face flush with the exterior of the garage. Again, just to keep the impact as minimal as possible. Didn't need to go that far, and so we're trying to maintain that subsidiary feel to the addition. Again, the details will match the shutters on this window, match the existing windows as far as the trim and the double hung window and the Munson pattern. Those will all match the existing home. There's no change proposed to the first floor of the garage. It's all happening on the second floor here. So the side view, the brick is maintained. There's going to be that wood band that transitions from the masonry to the shingles. We're maintaining this eave line, so there's a gutter line. And here is the dormer. It is set back in plane, as you can see from the other view. So it's not flush with this plane. It's set back, I think it's 7 feet back from this wall. We chose to do a flat roof versus a gabled, again, to mitigate the mass of that dormer. So we felt that that would be more in keeping with this addition rather than trying to do a larger gable. The rear of the garage is very similar to the front. There's a window with shutters. Again, shingle and all the other detailing to match the existing detailing. And this roof also that connects the main house to the addition. It's a hallway with some closets. It is a steeper pitched roof. But again, it's all shingles, so it will gray in time and start to blend in with the rest of the home. I think you don't need to get into the. There's the roof plan. This roof pitch is the same as the existing. You can see what we're doing with the roof here. There is a flat portion to the roof that won't be determinable from the exterior. It'll appear as a steep roof here, and then it levels out. We did not want to make that roof any taller than the addition on the garage. I wanted that link to be, again, even subsidiary to the massing of the garage addition. So I think all these details and these scale elements really contribute to a very sensitive addition to the original design of the home. And we spent a lot of time really keeping the ceiling heights as low as possible and really maintaining a minimal impact. I think that in combination certainly with the mature landscape screening that exists makes it a very successful improvement to the home. So I hope that if you have any questions, I can answer them for you.
Let's let the staff do the report first, and then we'll see if we have any questions.
Thank you, Chairman Pairitz. This is another Stanley Anderson home in the district. I think this home has maintained the integrity over the years, and what's proposed tonight is a modest addition to allow more flexibility in the second floor space. The roof forms are really being maintained. It's a matter of increasing the height of the wall to allow living space to be able to occur under the roof. As Mr. Krasnodebski mentioned, the material choice are similar to the existing house. The existing brick on the garage face will remain. The window choice and trim detailing are going to match existing conditions. And the design of the dormer and the roof form has really been thoughtfully looked at to keep the mass down. This project also required a variance from the Zoning Board of Appeals and ultimately the City Council. The Zoning Board reviewed this project on Monday and unanimously, I think, forwarded a recommendation to the City Council to support the variance. There are findings in support of the addition and alteration in your staff report. There are 3 conditions of approval. Because there was no removal of vegetation or change to the footprint, a landscape plan was not a recommended condition of approval for this project, but we are asking that photographic documentation be submitted prior to the issuance of a permit to capture the original Stanley Anderson design. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Yeah, I have a question, Megan. Is the garage part of the original home, and was it built with it? And also, is there going to be any impact or change to the original house based on the linkage in terms of the structure?
With respect to the garage being original, I believe it is. There's been no information submitted that would lead us to believe otherwise. I haven't seen original drawings for this particular house. The one change that is occurring to the existing roof form is the connecting link between the garage and the main house. There is a very low-pitched roof there now, and in order to allow a walkway between the main house and the garage, that roof pitch is increasing in height.
And Megan, did the ZBA approved it as proposed, or did they make any changes?
The zoning board approved it as proposed.
Okay. And for the petitioner, the west elevation you have up there, it looks like there's shutters on the, which I don't see on our west elevation on the garage. Is that correct?
We're going to put shutters on that new window on the garage, both front and back, to match the existing.
Okay, to match the existing.
Yeah, right.
And did you look at any other dormer designs?
We did.
Besides, what else did you look at?
We looked at a gable dormer similar to the existing dormers on the house, and it didn't lend, it got larger. The roof element was larger, more gable form on it, and so it didn't seem proportionate to the addition or to the house.
Yeah, it just seems to, the gable as it is right now, it just strikes me that it's a little bit out of place with the rest of the elements of the house, but, you know.
Do you have these views on your computer, these views of the,
No,
existing house? No.
Okay.
Question?
I'd like to ask you why you've chosen for the facade material of the second floor of the garage to be wood shingles when the rest of the house above the brick is white. And so therefore, in my opinion, I would think that it would not be as noticeable, because as those wood shingles get aged, they get dark, and then it's going to be much more noticeable. So why did you decide to do that instead of using the siding that's on the
Maybe
second?
I wasn't clear. The material we're going to use, this shingled gable end is going to be the white cedar shingles that match the existing garage
and the home.
Yeah.
But I know,
It's-
but that's not the reason.
Right, yeah, I wasn't too clear on that. So this connecting link is the wood shingles, that are roof shingles that match the roof shingles of the home, because that is roof area there versus wall area, which is the white shingles.
Painted
Well,
white,
Painted
painted
white,
shingle.
right,
Because
to match that.
my daughter has a house that's wood shingled and it's gotten dark, and it would really be.
Right, yeah, no, I
Jarring.
agree, I would agree. White shingles is the way to go
It said
with
wood
that.
shingles, but it didn't say you're going to paint them white, so I'm
Correct,
relieved. Thank you.
correct.
Any other questions for staff or petitioner? Otherwise, I'll ask for public testimony. If there's any public testimony, I know there is.
It's Joanne, Stanley Anderson.
Once again. Again, just for the record, I'm Paul Bergman, keeper of the Stanley Anderson Archives. This is the Calcraft number 2 house. It is directly north and south. This house is directly north of the house that you've just agreed to demolish. Carl Kraft built this house in 1932. Apparently he was the only person left in the county who still had the cash to build houses in 1932. A question was raised whether this is the original garage on the house. It is. The house footprint has not changed over time, although Stanley Anderson did remodel the house several times during the course of his career. I think this is a fine addition to the house. This is the kind of design work that I'm hoping to see people do as they modernize and upgrade the Stanley Anderson houses. So where I want to be fierce in trying to preserve the Stanley Anderson houses, where I see nice design work like this, I feel it important to stand up and let you folks know that I do support this kind of work. So those are my comments.
Appreciate that, thank you. Any other public testimony? Seeing none, this is time for us to deliberate or ask any other questions that we may have. And I would like to point out that I asked the question whether you had the view of the west from the photograph. That in 2 dimensions, I don't think that this is as helpful to understand as if you had that dimension looking down the driveway from the west. This actually makes the garage look like it's a little heavier in bulk than the rest of the house. But I don't think that that's actually how it would appear in reality, because that front of that house is so much far forward, and there's quite a large west wall that imposes itself on the driveway that this garage relates to, and you can see that quite clearly in the picture. So I think actually the funny thing is the existing garage actually looks a little bit small in that relative scale of that, so that's why I think anytime we have opportunities to kind of reinforce the notion that the two-dimensional drawing isn't what the reality is, we always ask for, help on understanding that. So, but I think in this case, that's it's actually not, it's not as it appears here to be out of scale at all with that elevation of the property. So I think it's also very nicely done, and I don't have any other comments unless anybody else has.
I worked for the Knights when they owned this house, doing their designing at the house on the inside. Do you happen to have a closet? Because her has a big closet. You're allowing him to have one that doesn't show it on the design? I thought maybe. It's a great plan. I love this house.
Guy?
I support the petition as well. I think it's, as Paul said, this is the way that people can upgrade these homes so that they appeal to a greater number of purchasers over the years, because, this isn't a government job. These houses have to support themselves as far as being good environments, so this is great. And I think what's really interesting about this design, this is one of the houses I think that Stanley Anderson, this isn't my point. This is an aside here, though, that I think I'd throw myself under the bus for this house. This is just, I've always loved driving by this house on Westminster. It's just so beautiful. It makes you want to, just cry. It's so pretty. And what's really interesting about it is the entry from the north. Now, I don't know how the land was laid out originally, if it was originally this size lot, but it was a very deliberate decision to come in along the driveway and enter the side. I mean, you almost think you're in, if all you saw was this picture, you think you're on the lots on Washington Road, and they're very narrow, and you decide, do I come in the front of a narrow building, or do I come in the midsection of it, and so forth. But here it's all done in sort of that English tradition of the estate home planning of Lutchens, where you come in the north dark side, and then you go to the south side, and you enjoy all that beautiful sun on your living spaces, and then so that the front yard facing Westminster isn't the entry point at all. That's where you're actually going to be enjoying your life and so forth. So interesting kind of a decision-making process, and I support the whole thing, though. I think it's going to be great. Nice job.
Any other comments, questions? The entrance covered on the west elevation is remaining?
Yes.
Thank you. Just want to make sure. If there are no other comments, I'd entertain a motion.
Well, the entrance faces north.
Well, actually, if you look on this drawing right here,
Which way are we?
go back to the photograph.
Yeah, the garage is on the north side of the house.
Yeah, the garage is on the north. So what's not shown in this drawing is the small covered entrance to the west, or the north face of the house
this
on the west elevation.
Yeah,
It's,
that's
I
facing
think
north.
it's shown,
Well, that's
it's
what-
not shown so that you can see the addition that they're proposing. If they drew that, you wouldn't be able to see that.
That's correct.
Yeah, but actually, it's another element that'll be in front of your eye when you're looking at this, and again, soften the impact from the street. It's very far back in any case, but I think that it's another one of those nice, it's a nice detail of the house that will actually help this read well. So.
I do have one question. The door to the right of the garage, has that been altered? Has that door been changed, or the entrance to that been changed at all?
This is what the door is on the house now.
Has anything been changed there? It's really hard to tell.
Oh, there's the drawing I was looking for. Yeah, yeah. That, you can see in that drawing how much smaller the garage really does appear to the house, and so a larger garage doesn't really impose itself very much on that, from that perspective, if you will. But that door is the door right there that he's talking about.
Right, that door. We're not going to change that door. That's going to stay as is. I think there's a screen door on there. I'm not sure, but that door stays. Yeah, it stays as is.
So I've got a picture of it on the west elevation. That's as is, as it's
Yes,
shown in the west
that's
elevation.
right.
Okay, great.
That is.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody else?
Nicely done. Thank you.
That's great. Do I have a motion?
I'd like to make a motion that we approve the petition as submitted.
Motion's made by Commissioner Berg. Do I have a second?
Second?
Second by Commissioner Swenson. I knew that.
Is that with the conditions and the staff report?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
No, it says.
I believe the motion was as recommended.
Well, he said well,
Okay.
whatever.
The motion is as recommended by the staff, with the staff recommendations. All in favor, say aye. 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 Opposed? No opposed. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Nice to see you. All right. All right, we're going back to number 3, which is,
Go now.
I'm sorry. that
Commissioner,
is,
I'd like to ask permission to recuse myself from this petition due to my firm's involvement with the project.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Withdrawing looks like these are thicker than.
You can't because we're talking afterwards.
Thanks, Guy. So everybody does the ex parte out of order. I didn't ask, but he's ex parte on that one, so I'll get there.
Guy. This is something new. Because afterwards we're going to reconvene. You can't leave.
For what? Well, I'll be downstairs. If you need me, come get me.
I didn't read that either.
Okay, well, come and get me when you're done, okay?
My baby.
Okay, so this is a request for a certificate of appropriateness for a prototype business directory sign for use in the city's business district, and this is going to be presented by city staff. We had one ex parte conflict. That was Commissioner Berg, and he's left us. And we've had an opportunity to see this full-size mock-up in Market Square this past weekend. So appreciate Kathy standing out in the cold and giving us that opportunity. So Kathy.
Thank you. This matter came before the commission for an introduction and information. I think it was in the it was a lot warmer then. I think it was in July, and it's. Directory signage, some form of directory signage in Market Square is something that's been talked about for a few years, and in particular, with the formation of the Central Business District Advocacy Group, there's been more focus on what the city can do to help support our local businesses. With encouragement and a recommendation from the Central Business District Advocacy Group, staff did go out and hire a professional consultant, Mellicar Architects, and the concern among the members of the Central Business District Task Force was to make sure that the directory sign was not a typical mall directory or was not something that would diminish the character of Market Square. So after much work, you have drawings of what is proposed. At this point, this would be a prototype, a base and a frame that would be used at one installation. The proposed initial installation is on the west side of Western Avenue, near the front of the Lake Forest bookstore, but more out toward the street. So it will be a location that would catch the attention of those getting off the train, of people walking down Western Avenue. That would be a location that would allow us to get some feedback on the base and the frame, get some feedback on the insert. The insert would be on an aluminum plate that would be easily removable, probably affixed simply on pins, and the frame would open and we would be able to remove that and recreate it maybe annually, more often if it was necessary. The second installation is proposed this is actually an image of the first location that I just mentioned. This is the bookstore. Somewhere in this general location, there were recently some benches put in and a planting area. We would see it moved back a little bit so it's not right out in the walkway, but settled in there a bit more in the planter bed. The second pilot program location is proposed on some brick wall on the west side of Market Square. We would obviously need to work with property owners in that case. And this installation would not have the base or the frame, but would simply have the insert piece, so that it will be something smaller scale. So those would be the initial two locations. The insert, because it can be easily replicated, could be modified. For instance, if there was a decision later on to locate a directory sign perhaps near Deer Path Inn, so that visitors to Lake Forest would know what was located on Western Avenue, what was located in Market Square. That particular insert could be reconfigured so that it was relevant to those looking at it at that location. You do have details in your packet about the proposed materials, design details. The consulting firm, obviously you have familiarity with them. We've really pressed to make sure that although this would be something reasonable, affordable, once we had the initial mold made, that it also would be something that really would be compatible with Market Square, the overall character of the Central Business District. It really is intended not to simply focus on Market Square, but to also identify businesses, for instance, north and south on Western Avenue. Staff does recommend approval. We've suggested a couple conditions. One would be that once we actually have the mock-up of the insert itself, that we would bring that back to you on a consent agenda so you could at least see it, get a sense of the size of the map. I know some of you who came out Saturday questioned whether the map was large enough, questioned the orientation of the map. So we would suggest that we bring that insert back to you, and that we bring back to you any future locations where this is proposed, so that once it's in place, we get some feedback. The Central Business District Advocacy Group gets some feedback. We would come back to you before we located others. The advocacy group did present this concept along with some other incentives that they'd like to pursue to the City Council at a meeting, at the City Council's last meeting, and the City Council is supportive of the concept of a directory sign. The final piece would be some smaller signs two initially. Again, not that we would want to see proliferation of signs, but something that perhaps could draw people either north or south on Bank Lane. Again, with a very high-quality, small sign that would simply be affixed with owner's permission to the brick wall. So interested to hear your comments, and
Could you just tell us about color and confirm that there's no lighting on these?
there is no lighting proposed.
Thank you.
The frame and the base are dark metal.
Is it green or black or?
Black.
Black.
My, my comment is I like the design. I think it looks really elegant and it's in the character of Market Square, and certainly I think something that the city wants to project. And I know I commented earlier about the size of the map, and I know that the city's taking that into consideration. But just, you know, now that I've been looking at it for a little while, I like the clock tower and sort of branding that as something to identify the city with. But I'm wondering if that's taking up too much space as opposed as to the rest of the directory, the map and the shops and things like that. It seems it's very heavy in that empty space. And I noticed from the directories, the examples that were put in our packet, you know, that they seem to prominently point out directory or something else that would draw, you know, the pedestrian to that, you know.
The
Those would be
insert
my
piece
comments.
is something that we're still working on. This was a prototype developed for, you know, to get a sense of how it would fit in the frame. But the comments we heard when we're on the street corner and your comments, we will take into consideration. And again, our recommendation is that once we get this plate laid out, that we would bring that back to you. And we may play with a couple options and get your sense, but.
You know, again, I like the clock tower. I'm just wondering if it should be smaller, maybe darker, heavier, so it, you know, we by losing the size, we still have the prominence of it. You know, because we seem to lose a lot of, seems to be a lot of open, lost space.
The other piece about making sure this insert is flexible is that if we use it for 6 months and we find that something isn't clear, we do have the ability to make those changes fairly simply. It would be generated on a computer. It would then be adhered to the aluminum plate. So that is, if it doesn't work the first time, we do have the ability to modify that. Whereas obviously once we have the mold created for the base and the frame, we want to pay for that once. So we want to get that piece right.
I like that a lot.
And I would note, just for those of you who weren't able to make it Saturday, in the council chambers, this does feel larger and appear larger, and so I would just look to some of you who are actually on the street
I agree with that
reaffirm that if.
Yes.
Because it feels big standing next to me.
Kathy, I have two questions. One, the first one is just the scope of the first signage in terms of the institutions or the storefronts that are going to be included. I mean, is it going to put the grill on Laurel all the way north? And I mean, what are the boundaries? And have the business community all bought in and had an opportunity to say, I want to be in it or not?
The advocacy group is talking about that.
Okay.
About.
That's why the insert's not done.
Yeah, right. Right. I imagine. Yeah, I was just curious.
You know, how to do? Is there a membership fee if you want to be on it this year? The advocacy group is still discussing that. We would really like to focus it on retail businesses and restaurants. We don't think that financial institutions need to be listed.
Right.
You can find those if you're looking for them. So we do have that direction, but exactly, will all of them list all of the businesses? Will, depending on the location, will the business names be adjusted? But They are clear that they want it is intended not to be just a Market Square directory. It really is intended to let people know what else is available and to encourage people to walk our business district.
The second question, and I know this would never happen in Lake Forest, but it seems to me that that sign would be a prized possession for a college dorm room or a fraternity room. And I'm just curious about the durability of the sign and its susceptibility to vandalism. The construction costs will probably be significant, and I just noticed in the packet that a lot of the other structures, while kind of gauche and large in nature, they're probably a little bit more durable. I'm just wondering if the hinge is there, if someone could rip it out. You know, it just, I mean, it really, I mean, I think, you know, you have to think of the unintended consequences, and we would never do that, and our children, God forbid, would never do that. But somebody walking out of the Lantern from Lake Forest College in the East Coast may be going, wow, isn't this neat? And so I really think the durability of it needs to be in question along with the character. I love it. I think it's beautiful. And I also like Paul's comment, I'm sorry, not Paul's, Bill's comment on the space usage. But I think how delicate it is and how easy it is to rip apart and its durability should be considered.
We did have a lot of discussions about durability, and we certainly looked at the materials and the installation with an eye toward durability. The plate itself, the fact that it will not have plexiglass or some kind of acrylic over it was appealing because it wouldn't yellow or get scratched. The plate itself, the information we have is that it is pretty durable. The plate piece is not extraordinarily expensive, so I think that's the other side, is that we recognize that if it does need to be replaced, it's something we're going to replace anyway, periodically. But yes, as we move forward, we're certainly, this would be installed in the same manner as our light posts. So it's not something that someone could pick up and walk away with. But those issues have been considered, and we'll continue to consider those moving forward. And that's why we're doing one as a prototype.
On the more shops, the two signs you plan to have, how big will they be? Is that at Heelander's?
You know, we don't have specific locations because we would have to get approval from business owners.
It kind of looks like, well, how big will it be, and what will the material be?
No, we don't have the specific dimensions on that, but we can certainly bring that back to you.
But you can see from the scale of the person's head that, you know, that sign is something along the lines of, you know, 2 feet by 2 feet or thereabouts. It's not 5 feet by 5 feet. The idea is to just, that's almost as much of an architectural feature as anything else, really. It's street furniture as much as directional signage, I think.
When will we know the amount of signage that will go up? How many are planned for the town?
What is planned right now is the one
just the two
base out on Western Avenue and the other wall sign. Okay. If other locations are proposed and funded, then we would bring those back to you for review. Okay. We really do want to get these out on the streets so that we can get some feedback, because there are some who have said, if you don't know where something is, then you shouldn't be shopping here. But there certainly is an interest in really bringing people to town and letting them know what's around the other corner.
Yeah. Is there an opportunity to use the back of it as well for something like community events, planned community events? You know, there's things in Market Square or other activities that could draw people into the future into the town?
That isn't something that's been considered at this point. I think the goal was really to have it be more street furniture than signage, because we often get requests for a lot of signage for all special events, and there's that delicate balance of really getting the word out about events and businesses and preserving the character. So I think what's proposed here is really a baby step to see what the reaction is and determine whether it does fit the character, and then to come back to this commission and get your feedback before going further.
Because it really does represent a unique opportunity, because everybody looking at that sign is going to be new to our town. It's not going to be the people that have been here.
Or college
but
students.
Yeah, it's new. It's people that are new, and they're going, what does the town have to offer? And so
There's a big sign though on Deer Path that's just near across the way from here that has all the things that are going to be happening in Lake Forest, so they could look at that.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think the nature of this was intended to be twofold, pedestrian directed, so therefore the scale is rather small. It's not shouting at you, the signage, it's not, and hopefully people don't drive by and stop their car to look and try to read this. So I mean, you would want it small enough that they can't.
Right.
And also goes with this is the handout maps that the institutions would have, stores and stuff that would have a similar map and this kind of thing. So the idea is that people arriving in town that don't know this community and they're shop for the day, they understand, oh, there's a directory, and then hopefully it's on somewhere on there they're directed to also know that there's a place to get maps. Or I don't know how you're going to do that, but the idea is to, you and I probably don't look at this very often because we know where we're going shopping, but or not going shopping in my case. Any other questions? I want to give the public an opportunity to comment. If we have any that we've managed to, please come up. We've managed to give the Elawa Farms organization a lot of input on their signs. Maybe we've got some comments from them. Please.
I'm Jan Gibson, 59 East Franklin Place. Years ago, Chicago residents moved to Lake Forest from the city of Chicago for their summer months of clean air, cooler temps, the clubs, tennis, golf, croquet, and a quiet, elegant country life. You could say that not too much has changed, I guess, except for the permanent residents and schools, sort of. This small town still has clubs, clean air, and a quiet elegance. With this, we still have our quaint market square and the rich architecture of Shaw and others. Well, within the last couple of years, we've had some dramatic changes along Western Avenue, a loss of softness and a character of that country life. We have concrete that perhaps is a little too white, perhaps could have been a little grayer, a different palette that softened the look. Lights that brighten and make the street sometimes look more like a landing strip at night. Islands that were meant to slow down traffic, and they do because drivers run into them. And lampposts that for some reason are in the middle of the sidewalks and force pedestrians to walk around them. I'm sure there are some good reasons, but now we have another facet of commercialism, and I'm afraid our little town is going to look like other towns, and I really don't want to see that. At first, I wasn't against the signage because it's nice to know where to go and where to find things, but I think I am now after looking at some of this. Even though the sign may seem large here and may not seem large as you folks looked at it on Saturday, I still think it's rather intrusive, and it doesn't really fit our market square. The only sign that I kind of liked was and I thought was plausible, was the one that says more shops. 2 heads high, not too big, and actually kind of points the direction in a more discreet way. I think having these signs really does diminish the great architecture in Market Square, and it would stick out. I would suggest a couple alternatives in assisting our fine businesses. First, I would design a first-class and elegant brochure or map, just first class. Have them at every counter in town, and print them, update them quarterly, monthly, whatever. No ads, no silliness, just a nice sign for people to go in and because people will be going into that first business to see, so fine they take the map. Perhaps also the second is to invite maybe the National Trust. They have a rep who lives in Madison, Wisconsin, and he helped lead the Libertyville project for their Main Street project. They won an award. And they brought back a thriving downtown, keeping the character that actually befits them. So I'd like to keep the quaint elegance, that little country life that we have here of Market Square without adding more elements to the Market Square area. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Deliberations.
Kathy, I remember maybe 3 years ago, or was it longer, when the Chamber of Commerce met with the HPC over at the old municipal building, and how badly they felt we needed some signage. So could you speak to that? There are quite a few people from the Chamber of Commerce there.
I don't remember that specific meeting, but the Chamber of Commerce has been involved in this discussion. They have been active in requesting this before the Central Business District Advocacy Group. And certainly the brochure and the map, currently there is, that is produced by the Chamber, but we certainly have encouraged that it be more widely distributed and be more attractive. But yes, this is, the whole concept of a directory is something that we continue to hear from property owners, from businesses, from the Chamber. And I think for the very reasons that Ms. Gibson said, we're bringing it to you as a prototype and as a pilot project. Something that will be reviewed, something that will be brought back. Because particularly in these economic times, I think both the City Council and the advocacy group want to be responsive and want to be open to new ideas, while at the same time being mindful of preservation of the character, which is what makes Lake Forest such a special place.
I said to you the other day that I thought we should have some sort of folder or some brochure. Certainly, I would not like to see one in front of the Deer Path Inn, a big sign, but to have just, as Mrs. Gibson has said, to have brochures at so many of the places. But I do understand that the Chamber of Commerce really wanted us to do something, and we have so many empty buildings, I mean, you know, that we just maybe need something to bring everything back to Lake Forest for people to shop here. So I can see maybe a couple, but I can't see more than that.
Yeah, you know, it's funny, I remember the first time this came up last summer, Kurt had mentioned, well, have we had, I think there were two comments that really resonated. One, have we tried a map and a brochure? And I think Bill asked the question, well, what's really driving this? You know, just what was the impetus for this need? Was it a perceived need? Was it a solution looking for a problem? And I think that's, I mean, I think the points were well taken. It's almost like you could pilot the brochure to see what sticks. You know, there's a sense of permanency to this that is concerning, especially if it's not needed because of the points that were mentioned. And if it's a pilot, could it be taken down? I mean, is that a plausible alternative? How are we going to measure the effectiveness of that and the usage of that to evaluate it? When you do a pilot in business or anything else, if you're uncertain of it, then there's criteria for success and you decide to keep going or not. And if it's a pilot that stays forever, then I think it's a much bigger decision, and I would be more cautious of it. If it's a, hey, let's try it for the summer and poll people and be really structured and thoughtful about this to say go or no go after a certain period of time, then I think differently of it. But I would think it's a no-brainer to do that insert in a map form right away. Once it's settled, fold it up and put it out. And that should be low cost and that should be easy. And then we try that. Just, you know, to just create demand and interest and awareness. Do you kind of know what I'm saying?
Yes, and there is, the Chamber of Commerce has for many years produced a map and produced a brochure, and you know, maybe it, I know they've tried different types, but despite that, and maybe it needs to be distributed in a different way, despite that, there still is this request. And certainly, once this is put up, it could be removed. I think we did hear you that you were concerned about moving too fast. And you're also correct, some of it is perception. But I think what the Central Business District Advocacy Group is realizing that a lot of what we're dealing with in the Central Business District is perception. In fact, the comment about all the vacant storefronts, if you look at our numbers and compare them to 5 years ago, 8 years ago, 10 years ago, the numbers aren't very different. So much of it is perception, but perception is important. If people feel that our downtown has empty storefronts or our downtown isn't vital, that tends to really build on itself. So you are correct, it's perception, and part of it is simply being responsive and doing something. I think the Central Business District Advocacy Group wanted the city to take the lead on this project, the city to hire a consultant, because they wanted it to be very carefully considered. And If the chamber came forward with something, it might be done from a different point of view, or if the business group. So I think all the concerns raised are reasons why this hasn't come forward in response to requests years ago. But it is something that I think there continues to be interest in seeing what the response is. But it certainly could be removed if it was determined to be inconsistent with the character or detrimental.
So
I think it could be a little.
I do have a couple
sorry.
of comments for you, and sorry, but if I were pitching this on the other side, I would have a stop sign next to it. Because in the relative scale of a stop sign, this is quite diminutive. And the stop signs are all over the place. We're just used to looking at them. The backs of them are black in Lake Forest. I mean, you just don't realize how, this is street furniture is all this is. This is not, this is, at best, this is a nod to the business owners with respect to, their requirement for some more signage for pedestrians. This doesn't scream, here's where the Jewel is, and here's where the Walgreens is. It's a nod, this is we're doing what we can for you, but we're gonna preserve the character first of the community, and then we're going to see what we can do for you. So I think it's well done. I think the intention is okay. I think that I don't see this as changing the character of the environment any more than putting a bench would, because it's at that kind of relative pedestrian scale. I do think that it's very important that it not be inappropriately sited, and we talked about that out on the site. You don't want this in the middle of a sidewalk where it interrupts the flow of pedestrians. You want it to be in a landscaped area, or, in the specific area we were looking at, there was a garbage can. I would actually prefer to see this than the garbage can. So, again, put it next to a garbage can. I think I would bet you will vote for this over the garbage can. We have them all over the downtown. The other thing about this is it's in 2 dimensions, which makes the sides of the sign appear thicker than they really will be, because when that's executed in a round cylinder, you never see that much plane. You see the front of it. So that happens at the post, it happens at the 2 sides, and I suspect that it will have a little even more fragile feel. And I appreciate the comments of how do you keep someone from, I'm not so really worried about anybody stealing it, because I think that would be a major effort, but hitting it with a baseball bat might be, a vandalism opportunity. Well, we got opportunities for that all over Market Square. There's all kinds of delicate stuff, and we talked about this same issue at Elawa Farms with the signage that they have out there. That's very delicate in some places. So, I mean, I think it's worth trying. I don't think that it's the kind of thing that if we don't like it, we can't remove it. It's 2 bolts in the sidewalk, or, whatever it is, however it's, I think it's fairly well executed. I suspect that you would put it up and people would walk by it for a month before they even realize it's there, myself.
I like both Jan and Jim's comments, and I do think that it could be a little bit more palatable. And I love Jan's point that the sign that said "more shops" was lovely to look at on a blank brick wall. And I love this design. I think it's fabulous. It could be mounted on walls that are just sort of plain with brick, like right here out of Forest Bouderie, tucked within a column on a wall that everyone passes by as they go around the corner. Just the top part without the base, mounted on the wall, might be quite nice, a little less obtrusive, and a nice compromise between the 2. We still have the size and the map, but it's not on a post glaring at you.
But you might not see it as much there because you're walking across there from the train station.
People really walk, around in the covered area often, in front of the Bouderie.
That's.
I don't know.
I think that's the
I don't know. I
bookstore.
mean, I think it could be, this is Forest Bouderie.
Oh, okay.
But I think there are just, if we really place them well, and if we can put them on walls, maybe on blank brick areas, like we're putting that sign that says "more shops," that might be a nice way to do it.
I don't necessarily disagree with that. My only thought regarding that comment is that, people who are not familiar with Lake Forest, who come in for the specific purpose of shopping, they may be more familiar with the concept where there's a directory out on the sidewalk or out on the street rather than against the side of a shop. Not that I do a lot of shopping, but that's my only thought on that.
Well, it's not a done deal once it's put up. I mean, if we really don't like it, we can take it down.
Well, I don't think, I mean, I hadn't noticed before that this picture is in the middle of the sidewalk, and I don't think I would want to see it there. I would want to see it back, you know, in the proximity of where the garbage can is, so that's, I mean, you really don't want this interrupting the flow of pedestrians, you know.
I thought you wanted to have it more by the bookstore. Right?
Well, that is.
Here it is.
I think the picture is backwards, isn't it?
Yeah, I disagree.
They want one on each corner.
You really got to look
Oh,
at.
you don't want two. You don't want two of these, like one.
No,
on
there's
each
only
corner.
one. There's only one.
Isn't there one on the corner of the
No,
No, no.
foodiery and one on the corner of the
No,
bookstore?
it's
Excuse
just going to be
me,
by
if I can
the
interrupt.
bookstore.
please.
Why don't you consider putting them in the portico shares? There's several portico shares in Market Square. There's one, you said the Forest Bootery. There's one by the bookstore. All newcomers coming to Lake Forest walk under the portico shares because they're interested in the architecture and that wonderful feeling that Shaw was designing. There's a further cut through to the wine shop in the back next to Williams-Sonoma. You could put a sign there. You could, there's other opportunities for mounting all of these signs on the walls throughout the central business district without going to the heavy bracket post that the signs then, they mount on the wall. It begins to adopt very much the feel that you find when you're walking around central London. If you're in the business, if you're in the city part of London, there are a great deal of very subtle signs. They tend to be mounted rather high because they're directional signs. But you could take these signs and mount them down at eye level and have them mounted against the walls in a way that would become quite elegant to have them sprinkled throughout the business district. You'd have to find a place on Deer Path Avenue to have one also, but I think you could mount these in a way where they sort of meld into the environment, so if you're not looking for it, it doesn't meet your eye. What concerns me when we're talking about putting up a post and you're talking about benches and this furniture concept is we're beginning to really clutter up downtown Lake Forest. We have all sorts of junk all over the place. We have this awful brickwork edging around all of the little gardens in Market Square, all the little garden spaces in Market Square. I don't know if any of you stumbled over one of those, but if you've been on crutches recently, you know how difficult those are. We have benches everywhere. We have these funny little traffic islands all over the place. So we're beginning to fill Lake Forest up with lots of clutter for various reasons. If you put this thing on a post, I think you add to the clutter concept. I think if you just simply take the sign and mount it on the walls in some reasonably discrete areas, I think they sort of begin to disappear on you. That's my comment.
Appreciate that. Maybe in an effort to move this along, let me ask you a question, Kathy. Is your focus on this sign to be able to continue to build a prototype? Are you worried today about getting an approval on a location, or because I'm sure we could deliberate the location ad nauseum.
Well, how about this as a, just as a result of the discussion? I think the goal of the Central Business District and the City Council is to be responsive, is to do something. Mm-hmm. So maybe as the first part of this pilot project, maybe instead of having the full sign made, we look at 2 locations with simply the wall-mounted sign. Now, we would have to work with property owners to see where we could get approval, but if we just started with the installation of 2 wall-mounted signs, we could then see how the insert looks, see how people react to it. We could always come back and if the reaction was good and people said, we need to see these more places, then we could come back and talk about specific locations. But at the front end, we don't have to incur the cost of having
well, I see some nodding heads here, so I'm thinking that at the moment would get support. I think the design isn't a question here. It's more a question of, do we want it on a pedestal, and if we do, where do we want it, and how specifically do we want it? So if you're willing to live with that as a recommendation, I'll take an informal poll, or people okay with that idea? I'll ask for a motion if you are.
And I can't speak for the advocacy group, but my sense is they would like to move forward with something. So I reserve the right to come back to you and say that
you can always come back.
We can come back.
All right, well, in that case, let's see if someone can craft a motion that'll help us on that.
I'm too new
Any
to craft a
triers on that?
motion.
You're gonna, no?
I'm too new for that.
You want me to try craft a motion? I'll try it. Can I do that? Am I entitled to do that? All right, so I would move that we approve the prototype design for a trial installation on walls. They're gonna need to tell us where those walls are someday before they put it up. And it'd be nice if we could see the shop's signs at the same time. And if you do decide that you want to pursue a pedestal location, we'd like to see that at a subsequent time.
Can I ask a question on your motion?
Sure, please.
You're talking about signs, S-I-G-N-S.
Well,
We're just going to have one, I thought of this.
I think that she was still hoping to have 2 of
I
these
would
large
suggest
signs made, but it's,
approval of 2 wall-mounted signs with the condition that we come back to you with the actual layout of the insert and the locations, but that you give us the go-ahead to essentially
2 wall-mounted.
do the.
I second your motion.
all right. Motion was made by Commissioner Pairitz, seconded by Commissioner McTier. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Hey, thank you, Mr. Bergman, for your help on that one. That was helpful. All right, I think that we have any other opportunity. We have an opportunity for the public to address the Historic Preservation Committee on non-agenda items. Seeing none, I think that we have one other item that we're going to adjourn to discuss. Is that correct?
Won't be adjourning. It's still a public meeting, but we're going to go into a workshop session.
All right.
In the conference room, and no action will be taken. Information and some discussion based on council direction to talk about some amendments to the preservation ordinance related to demolition due to neglect.
Thank you. So that being the case, I won't ask for a motion for adjournment, but this will conclude our televised portion of the broadcast. Thank you, audience members out there from TV land.